feel like you're stuck, like nothing's happening, like you're putting in all the work and the effort, but nothing's showing up, you could be this close to gold. And in today's podcast, I'm going to be talking with a special guest about all that stuff that goes on before you break through to gold.
Are you an entrepreneur, small business owner, or consultant looking to boost your authority, influence, and impact? The Author Switch podcast with best-selling, award-winning author Carma Spence is your answer. Tune in for actionable advice, powerful strategies, and engaging interviews to turn on your author switch and take your business to the next dimension.
The Author Switch.
Hi, and welcome to the Author Switch podcast. I'm your host, Carma Spence, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write client-attracting books that grow their business. And today I have a special guest, Joanna Horton McPherson. She's a leader, a serial entrepreneur, and a speaker who specializes in the deeper aspects of leadership and personal fulfillment. And before this podcast, we were having a really interesting conversation about entrepreneurship and how it's almost deviant and makes us different, and how sometimes we're not always aware of our own difference. So her mission is to inspire the next generation of global leadership. Welcome aboard, Joanna.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on the ship.
Yes. The Author Switch ship. I've never heard of it. That's kind of cool.
Ship. Say that 10 times fast. That's a
Oh, I
good
know.
warm-up exercise.
That's good. I'll use that as my vocal warm-up next time.
That's good.
So first, let's get, I didn't go into a full bio for you. Is there anything that you want people to know that will help them understand why we are listening to you in the first place?
Sure. My long path in acting brought me to coaching people in their transformative message. Speaking of personal development, when many of us get to be experts or have knowledge or expertise in our field, people say, come talk to us. But not all of us are very clear on what we're going to say that will convey our message and sell our services naturally. So I coach people in their transformative message to inspire their audience.
That's awesome. Now, and we talked about this a little bit about how personal development is integral to being an effective entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit more about that, and we'll explore from there.
Well, I've done the research because I've lived this for many years. I mean, we started before we started recording in our conversation, talking about when we've come up in our own families off the blueprint.
Yeah.
And especially, I'm thinking back when I was in public school here in Maine, how it becomes clearer when you want to do things differently at a young age, that you're set apart in some way. And some people struggle, they get bullied and so forth, and some are isolated. And I just remember I didn't struggle socially so much as always aware that I just thought it should be a different way. I thought I knew better, and I struggled with authority over the coming years. And I think a lot about, because I'm a mother and I work a lot in education, I feel so deeply for the children who, against best practices in education, are told, sit down, be quiet, listen to the teacher. Because a lot of the generative, creative energy that young people naturally have, and especially entrepreneurial people who think they know what should be happening, don't learn that way. They learn experientially, taking things apart, putting them together, asking questions, moving in the world, being engaged with the world. And that is something that, like, the blueprint doesn't want you to do. You can't fit into the widget, make this and listen and stand in line and listen to the bell and move rank file. And so I remember when I was in my 20s, I'd gotten the job out of college and I was in the apartment and I was like doing what I thought I should be doing. That was success. And I struggled so deeply because I just wanted to go act in New York and like struggle and wait tables and do a nonprofit. That was when I really understood I'm not made for the blueprint. What about you? Do you have rememberings of those two things in your life?
A couple of things you said really struck. For one, it was interesting. I'm a kinesthetic learner. I learn by experiencing, and it made me wonder, are people who are prone to be entrepreneurs I wonder if there's research. Do they tend to be kinesthetic learners? I
Hmm.
think that's interesting. That'd be interesting to explore, and I will probably explore that after this podcast.
Yeah, well, when I was in my master's program in the school at Harvard, the School of Education, Howard Gardner was one of the professors, and he is the seminal researcher who talked about multiple forms of intelligence. And this was groundbreaking
Yeah,
educators because we could understand that, oh, standardized testing tests this much when
mhm,
there's all of this intelligence and all of these kids who learn differently. And this is like the beginning, I think, of the wave of neurodivergent learning. And then, I mean,
yeah,
the whole conversation of entrepreneurship we haven't even touched on, but the way people learn is so personal.
yeah,
It starts at about age 3. You get feedback from the world whether your style is welcome or not.
yeah,
For your whole life. I mean, 90% of your
yeah,
brain develops by the time you're 5 for your life. So what we
yeah,
learn from a young age, we carry with us. Now, I don't know if that makes
absolutely.
sense in the conversation.
Well, that made me remember, when I was learning to read. Now,
Mm.
I actually haven't been diagnosed dyslexic, but I know I am. And learning to read was so hard. And my father, who's an educator, of course, started tutoring me. I mean, I think I tried to read The King, the Mice, and the Cheese by P.D. Eastman like 5 times before I was actually able to read it. And when I did, it was like, exciting. And my dad would give me, okay, this is back in the 70s. He would give me certificates that were laminated that said, "You finished reading this book." I still have those in an envelope somewhere.
You know, it's so funny, Karma, you're showing where you struggled, and it is something that you do now in your life. You're a writer.
I am a writer. And the funny thing is, I have an uncle who's even more dyslexic.
Yeah.
His wife had to read him books because he couldn't read them at all.
Mhm.
And now he's a writer.
This is really powerful, transformative stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You know
like,
what?
don't
Yeah.
let people, okay.
She wants to be part of it, or
I
he,
guess he
or
does.
they.
I think he wants breakfast and I haven't fed him yet because he wasn't interested. Go away. Go away. Go on.
Yeah.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
That's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
How that relates to
So,
the entrepreneurial journey.
well, that goes back to the other thing that when you were talking about that kind of triggered for me is one of my first evidence of entrepreneurial leaning is, again, my dad's an educator. So this is back in the days of the dittos. I don't know if you're old enough to remember dittos. I love the
No,
way they smelled,
I'm an
but
80s baby, so maybe that
oh,
predated me.
yes, that totally predated. They were gone by the end of the 70s, I think. But that's how they used to do copies. It was like this purplish paper, and you'd write on it, and then they'd run it
Give
through
me
the
a graph machine.
kind of like a mimeograph, but they were called dittos.
Okay, got it.
And it always smelled nice, and the paper was kind of wet. My dad brought home some of that ditto paper. I created a newsletter. So, of course, I'm a communicator. I've been a communicator since I was a baby, practically. And I created a newsletter. He made a bunch of copies. I stapled them together, and then I went around my neighborhood and sold them for a quarter. And because I was like 6 or 7 years old, people gave me way more than a quarter. It's like, "You're so cute. I'll buy this piece of crap."
Yeah, yeah. It was darling at the
It was
time.
yes, and there were other times where, like, I would just make money in an entrepreneurial way, but I never self-identified as an entrepreneur
Yep.
until, gosh, probably my 40s. It took me that long to figure it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. I think that seems right on. Because you were saying earlier there weren't really examples of this ahead of
Exactly.
you. And
Exactly.
you
Everyone
had
in
so
my family.
this gets the self-development piece. Okay. You didn't have examples ahead of you, but you saw evidence in yourself. So what do we have to do? We have to do the research to understand ourselves better
Yeah.
and create, essentially inventing the wheel for ourselves. Like, I'm going to persist in this path because yeah, I mean, it's taking me down this rabbit hole, just the value of self-knowledge. And, my clients don't come for the self-knowledge. They come for the speech. They stay for the self-knowledge. Because I mean, it's
Right.
not like anyone's necessarily thinking, my problem is that I don't know myself well enough. No one
Right.
says that.
No one says that.
But when we can get in contact with what we care about, what drives us,
Yeah.
what we're feeling, because the level of fulfillment and feelings of success in the world are a very important thing to understand, and not have
Yeah.
others define it. Because
Yeah.
the bat we use to beat ourselves up with, like for me, it was like, oh, well, I'm in this job that at 23, I'm like, am I wrong for not being happy?
Yeah.
But then I was like, I need to measure myself by my own system to find what happiness means to me.
Right.
How do we get to that point?
I mean, at least for me, I think part of it is seeking role models that resonate with us. So, like, when you watch a TV show, which characters are the most interesting to you?
Mm.
They're probably interesting to you because you are like them in some way. And the example I often do is like the 100 Acre Wood. Who's your
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
character? Mine is Tigger.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Tigger has ADD, so do I.
Okay.
It's like there's
Yeah.
so many things that Tigger does that are like me. And
Mm.
Tigger's an outlier. And I'm like, it never occurred to me. I've always been an outlier. And I never understood why until I was in my 40s when I started realizing, oh, I've got dyslexia and ADD, and I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm all these things that no one around me was like. Everyone else were square pegs, and they fit into the
Square peg,
square
round
holes.
hole.
And I'm like this, I don't know, triangular peg, and I'm not fitting into the holes that are there.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think I think that's I mean, for me, that's what starts you on that professional internal work journeys. You start realizing, wait a minute, one of these things is not like the other, and that's me.
Ooh. And then you find the other. I just did a video about this, my first day at grad school. You find the other misfits.
Yeah.
All the misfit toys. You're like, this is
Yeah.
my crowd,
Yeah. I'm
because you
into misfit toys.
yes, and I have gotten so much benefit out of being in the entrepreneur crowd in the past, I would say 8 years. I've really seeped in. At first, sort of like imposter. Even though I
Yeah.
was an entrepreneur for years, like you, it took me into my 30s to really be willing to put that on and wear it as an identity. I
Yeah.
feel like I had permission. Like no one came and was like, "You're an entrepreneur now. You can say that." Like no one comes up and says that to you. But
No.
you have to grow up at some point and be like, no one's ever going to come and bless me with like permission and the belief in myself and the faith in
Yeah.
my path. One has to create that oneself. And I struggle with
Exactly.
that belief so much.
Exactly.
I could write a book about that. Maybe I will. But the difference I think in what we're talking about is when you're an outlier, turning that in rather than a weakness into your superpower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, okay, I'm gonna get geeky for a moment here.
Yeah.
Superman, when, his entire planet disappears, he's totally an outlier, but here
Yeah.
on Earth, but that's
Ooh.
what made him amazing.
We forget this. He was, like, alone.
Yeah, yeah. And look at I mean, if you look at because my husband's a real geek when it comes to superheroes. I only watch them on TV. I don't read the stuff. But if you look at the backstory of most superheroes, I mean, they're just horrible. Their
Yeah,
entire life's ripped apart, and that's
yeah.
what makes them special.
Ooh, that gives me goosebumps. Wow, that's really
Yeah,
powerful. It's alchemical.
it is. It is. We have to go through that not so fun crucible.
Yes.
But it's like that saying where, what doesn't destroy you makes you stronger.
Mhm.
And you have to realize I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
Therefore, I've got something to do and make the most of it. And some people are able to do that more easily than other people. And I'm not too sure what the difference is at this point.
Yeah, think about that too.
When you talk about your transformational message and personal development being a key part of that, what makes someone realize, okay, now I've got something I need to start going inward in?
Mm.
What have you found has led people, because it's that first journey that gets them to you in the first place, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, in the world of business, in the business entrepreneurial crowd, I tend to work with people like you and me who set their own path. Um, I see people come with a framework and a goal they haven't yet fulfilled. And it's usually around promoting their book or coming, we're talking mid to late career, so much knowledge and experience, but how do I convey it clearly? And what is my path? Because sort of like there's so much accomplishment. What are the 1, 2, and 3 key things that if I only have 5 or 10 minutes will really demonstrate my knowledge and my learning? But you asked, what is the moment that people see the need for that? I don't necessarily think people do see the need for it.
Oh, yeah.
My role is partly educating that when you set a high standard for yourself, like your
Mm,
TED Talk, that standard is exciting and very possible and very achievable given the amount of work. The higher the standard, the deeper the work is my view.
right.
You need to go down into the roots of the soil and understand what you came from. Because one thing we know about life is we live it looking forward. We're making plans, but often the universe just has jokes and doesn't fulfill
Yes.
our plans. Almost, I
Oh,
mean, if you look
boy.
back, almost never, really. But we
Yeah.
think we're the ones in control.
Yeah,
But if
no.
you look backward at your timeline from where you were, all these happy accidents or not so happy accidents, these things that happened end up being the novel of your life that we haven't read yet.
Yeah.
We don't really play it back for ourselves and go over the timeline. Like, what did happen to me? What did I come through? What did I have to learn? The growth that I've come through that now has enabled me to create these professional accomplishments. So you start to
Right.
really take the learning. That's what I mean by going the roots, what I've learned
Yeah.
and understand how it has emerged as this great oak,
And I think a lot of people do this where they take themselves for granted. I mean,
Mm.
there are times where, like, people will tell me, "Oh, Carmen, you're so awesome, you blah, blah." I'm like, "I'm just me. I'm just me doing me, going taking one step
Yeah.
at I mean, I'm just me."
Mhm.
I don't As a general rule, I don't think of myself as being all that extra special, but they on the outside are seeing things that I don't see. And I see that in my clients as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with some amazing people who are very humble. And I think when you have that high standard, like a TED Talk,
Yeah.
there's a aspect that humility will get you so far, but at some point you need to own your accomplishments.
But it is a tall order to say, please, would you please get on stage and explain to us all sitting here in silence, staring at you, how special you are? I
Now
mean, like
sounding
no
like
one,
you're
I've never
arrogant.
heard of anyone, unless they're like sociopathic, who's excited about that space. So what
Yeah.
you want to do, I call it the inspiring expert talk. And it's kind of a joke because the reality is maybe we are perhaps an expert. And like you said, you take these things for granted, but when put on the spot, this is where my acting path and my meditation path are synonymous. When you're put on the spot, it's a lot of pressure and nobody really wants to be on the spot.
Right.
What we do then is talk not about the accomplishments, but the learning,
Oh, that's good. I like that.
because
Let's go deeper on that after the break.
that's a good cliff to jump off of.
It is. And thank you for providing it.
In a city filled with stories, one author seeks the elusive, the transformative, the right idea. It's not just any idea, it's the one that will change everything. Through twists and turns, through doubts and revelations, the discovery that will elevate the book to the next level. It all starts with an idea by Carma Spence, available now on Amazon.
Hello and welcome back to the Author Switch podcast. I am your host, Carma Spence, with a cat that wants to be on my desk. And I oh my goodness, he threw me off. And I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, publish, and market their client attracting books so that they can grow their business. And today we are talking with Joanna Horton McPherson. Before the break, we were talking about self-development and entrepreneurship, and we landed on how do you talk about yourself in a way that showcases your expertise while not sounding like you're arrogant. Let's
Mm,
continue with that, Joanna. So you were saying,
yeah.
talk about the lessons, not the experience.
The expertise, yeah, and the
Expertise.
inspiring expert talk venue. And so a lot of people I see and network with and meet are on the speaking circuit now. People are like, "Hey, will you come share with us how you did this, how you got here? Share with us your expertise in this field." So why is 75% of the population more afraid of public speaking than death?
Yeah.
This is a statistic. It's well researched. I find this really interesting. I think about it a lot, and I think it's because the old game of public speaking is you're performing for like hundreds of people sitting in silence staring at you.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly anxiety inducing because then what we do is we are looking at ourselves and evaluating, like, how am I doing? Am I going to forget something? Do I sound stupid? Like, why am I even here? All of that is a nightmare, but that's
Yeah.
the old way. And in my view, there's no reason why anyone who's asked to invite people into their journey should feel nervous
Hmm.
on stage. We want to flip the entire model and say, what if your inspiring expert talk is truly not a performance to them, but like you're the host of this party, like you're in your living room and you've
Yeah.
invited these friends to be like, I want to tell this story to you. And it's not a proof of anything. Like we said, don't focus on your accomplishments. They can actually read the tips and hacks and the how-tos and your resume in an article.
Yeah.
They're here in the room with you and they're humans just like you on a journey in themselves. And so what happens is they're actually hearing your story for them
Absolutely.
as a contribution. And so what you want to do before you step on stage is prepare. It's just preparing your talk to feel inspired by your own learning and not your accomplishments. You focus on the wrong thing when you talk about your resume. You talk about what you came through that got you here. It's also more interesting to be like, this is where I started and this, and that happened. And now I'm here. That is incredibly seductive. And storytelling is a whole technique, Karma.
Yeah.
Movie. And this comes from acting, but taking us back into those moments that you talked about where you're like the book, reading the P.D. Eastman book, and these things captivate.
Yeah.
And then they illustrate your expertise far more than you explaining how much of an expert you are. And this is what
Exactly.
sells people on, like, I want to know her. I want to talk to her after this, after the thing. And it shows you're valuing yourself. It shows possibility. And so, yeah, that's the inspiring expert talk. That's how we approach it.
So can you give a little example of how a lesson learned showcases an expertise in some way?
Sure.
And it can be a fake one. I mean,
Example. I think it's sort of in tandem. Okay. You don't
okay.
become an inspiring expert speaker without the expert part.
Right.
So,
Obviously.
but so like the knowledge and experience sort of speaks for itself. You don't really actually have to touch that really at all
Okay.
because you carry it.
Okay.
Your accomplishments go with you in all ways and all things. What you've created in the world speaks for itself, like who you've worked with, the books you've published, the whatever, credential, blah, 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 blah. It all is unique to this person. What gets us stuck is trying to explain or justify it. So there has to be the work of, like, you just accept that you've created these things and now you're going to walk us how you got there. So for example, in a talk that I give, I explain a lesson from using a motto: if you want what they have, do what they do, and you'll get what they've got. That works only to an extent. If you think of mentors you've had, people you want to be like, success,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that
That
doesn't always
works to
work.
an extent.
Yeah.
To an extent, but then what you can't see is maybe you've achieved a version of success like they got, but what you can't see is how it feels on the inside
Mhm.
and the fulfillment that it does or does not bring you. And so at that point you say, how is this working for me? Why am I not happy doing blah, 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 blah? It's not fulfilling. A story I talk about is really understanding from my father's path, leaving a high corporate career as a young lawyer in DC and moving to Maine, leaving the path, leaving the career to be focusing on family. And he's now a Supreme Court judge in Maine. He actually
Wow.
found success in his own path by getting off of the
The
do what they
ordinary path.
know model. He didn't
Yeah.
want to be like those partners in his firm who are unhappy, divorced, alone, working all the time. He said, Joanna, measure yourself by your own yardstick. And so I'm bringing this full circle back to that's a story. That's an example of when I was in New York and went to pursue acting and got off of this corporate job I had. I measured myself by my own yardstick. I said, success for me is going to look like feeling fulfilled at this time. And now, I worked with more than 500 actors. I've had actors featured on major networks and people who have been featured in Forbes and all this sort of success stories.
Yeah.
Those things speak for themselves. It's the learning and the thing you did differently, like measuring yourself by your own version of success and fulfillment that really shifts
Yeah.
the talk.
That tapped into something I talked about earlier with public speaking superpowers. I mean, everyone said, "This is a brilliant book. You should really dive into this. You should." Why are you walking away from it?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't making me happy. It was making me crazy. But because I went through that 8-year journey of that book and finding that it wasn't me, that's how I came on to the author switch, which lights me up. Whether or not it makes money, it lights me up and makes me happy.
Wow.
But I wouldn't have discovered what I'm doing now if I hadn't gone through the wrong path first.
So what we would do with your talk, if you were doing, we'll use you as an example. Say you're like, I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to talk about my path and author switch. We would go back and we would say, I'd say, Karma, take me back to the first time you realized you were sitting with a public speaking book, maybe you were sitting with a client, maybe you were on your own, but there's something that came to your awareness that was not working. And you go back to that room, that day, the conversation you're having with yourself, and the thing you said, literally you quote yourself, I said this. And that's the story that people are like, I've had 100 of those.
Yeah.
But she did something different.
Yeah.
Karma made a switch and she just said, it lights me up. I'm so happy. Maybe it's not making money right now, but there's something still to be unlocked with that.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, you never know when you're 3 inches from gold, 3 millimeters from gold. You have to follow what you're you have to follow the journey that is making you fulfilled, not necessarily happy. It's not always happy, but fulfilled, which is kind of different. Then, I mean, at least this is my personal philosophy, is that if you follow the fulfillment, you'll get to where you need to go.
I think about that a lot, and especially in terms of passion-driven business. I've listened in the past several years a lot about making money in money books. I'm not someone who ever really thought about it, but what I knew is I had a block around stepping into what wanted to work through me. And it wasn't necessarily even about
Yeah.
money, it was about flow and contribution, and all of those things are part of money. And
Yes.
business perspective, we have to, speaking of when you don't know if it's going to convert into peeking through the soil and becoming a blossom, our job is to be a farmer and sow the seeds and water the plants and let the sun shine and till the soil. Our job is not, we always think our job is to like harvest everything. Like my job is to harvest. Like, no, the harvest comes because you dedicate yourself to the toil of just farming.
Right.
And all that
You know,
mums is like the icing on the cake, but you've got to be the baker first. Don't be like, I want to ice the cakes. Like, well, you haven't baked any cakes. Like, bake some cakes.
exactly.
Make that your job, right?
And that was something I think we were talking about before we started recording, was that you're doing all this farming or baking and you don't know you're doing it.
Okay. Say more about that.
Well, it's like all those years I was doing entrepreneurial things
Oh, yes.
and never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I was baking, I was farming, I was doing all the things that led to me being the person I am now, but I didn't know a now existed.
Yes. Very well said. Very well said.
And I think that's the way a lot of the I I'm sure you've had that experience where, you didn't know you were going to be where you are today when you
Right.
were 18 or 20, but all
Right.
the things you did at 18 and 20 led to you being where you are right now.
Yes. I have a lot to say about this piece too with future
Oh,
business.
right ahead.
It gets down into some really esoteric spiritual level. I think we forget that we are first spiritual beings who just operate on energy all the time. We forget this. It's actually a powerful tool, and you access it with what pictures and movies you play in your brain. And we're always like default, like whatever tapes we got along the way are always playing. But once you make it your job to clean up like your movie theater, like only play the movies that I want to see and that
Yeah.
feed me. And so some tools, I know we wanted to talk about practical applications, maybe is not, well, let's say it is personal development because I use it all the time. It matters to take time to examine your self-belief against what you want to see in the future, especially inside of your values. We often import values like money or family or friendships as defaults, but we forget, like, how are my friendships working? Do I feel supported? Am I engaged in conversations that fuel me? Am I contributing to lives? Am I a caring friend? Am I in money and business? Am I positioning myself to receive the revenue through what I do, the activities I do every day?
Yeah.
Who I want to become? What is the masterpiece that I want to create in my life? And for me, honestly, it's my marriage and my family. That's for me, far and away. I design my work around that because my ongoing path is in my inner life. Business
Yeah.
is relatively easy. It's the deeper stuff that matters the most. And so the future, like you don't know when it's going to peek through, but kind of you do. I
Yeah.
plan. I got a client yesterday. She's literally a vision board client for me. I've used the UN Sustainable Development Goals for many nonprofits. I've been in multiple slide presentations, and the quality education sustainable development goal is part of my nonprofit's mission. She co-wrote those.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's delicious.
I remember writing about 10 years ago, I want to work with global leaders and be their like secret weapon and help them craft their path. And now I'm doing it.
That's awesome.
And but I want to say, like, there's a testament to that's personal development work that I did. It's not magic. I'm not special. Really focused on what I believed was going to come and was
Right.
farming those seeds all the time.
And something what you said about values, it was like, I mean, I've done some work on what are my because there's the values you think you have, and then there's the values you actually have.
Oh, yes.
And I've done
So
some of that work, and I've come up with my 3. And I find that sometimes I live up to them, and sometimes I don't. And when I don't, I can feel it. I can feel it, and I'm like,
I'm
"There's
sharing.
something wrong here." But you have to be self-aware enough to know why does it feel wrong.
Would you mind sharing what those 3 are if you're clear on them?
Sure, creativity, kindness, and integrity. Now, creativity is the easy one. That's the easy one. It's very easy for me to be creative. Kindness is also something that comes very natural to me, but integrity is the one that I've struggled with because of the way I grew up. I came up with a self-belief that I didn't matter. And because of that self-belief, I got into a marriage, my first marriage, that put me in a situation where integrity I had to keep compromising on my integrity in order to keep the marriage alive.
Oh,
At
yeah.
some point, I kicked that marriage to the curb, and I'm now with the love of my life who's, like, totally supportive in all my values. But I still struggle with the fact that I let my integrity be tarnished
I see. Yeah.
during those 13 years. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a struggle I've had, and so I think that a lot of us probably have a similar story. There are values that we believe in that we want to live through, but sometimes we fall short of them because of life, because of bad decisions, because of whatever.
Oh, this is really significant stuff. I similarly had a what we call a starter marriage. Um, and
Yeah,
I remember the thing that I had to recover myself from, and we all have our own stories, but mine's is
yeah,
yours, was the compromise, the trust in myself was how I would
yeah,
the trust in my own judgment. Like, how did
yeah,
I let myself do that? It wasn't actually about anyone else. At
yeah.
the end of the day, it's like, how did I be okay knowing XYZ and I still did this?
Oh, absolutely. I left that marriage angry, not at him, at
Yeah.
myself.
So that's back to the personal development stuff. I see the level of healing that we all are still engaged in is it's under talked about, but we all
Yeah,
have these little tears in our parachute, and we're like, we're trying to fly, but there's like little tears, and they usually come from, like you said, it actually wasn't, it predated the marriage.
absolutely.
The not feeling that you matter, that's a wound that, I had that too.
And I'm still working on it. I'm
Yeah.
still working on it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing, and but at the same time, those wounds can be transformed into your strengths.
Into the superpower. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
I know, I
part of
think
the
that
reason why I do what I do is because I know my clients matter, and some
yeah,
of them also don't feel like they matter or are afraid they don't matter. But you have to matter if you're gonna put a book out there.
and I think the wounded healer model really fits here. Like, we're all healing each other, right? Because we
Yeah,
recognize we all carry. I think about a lot about my wound of an enormous amount of anger in my life around feeling I didn't matter. There's like a feeling unloved and like enraged about that.
yeah,
Right? And so for me, I had to recover so much lost energy around being angry a lot of growing up. And it was very immature and emotionally reactive response. I mean, a dramatic person, I'm an actor, but I had to really learn to work with that. And similar to those wounds of feeling like we don't matter, the healing isn't necessarily in stitching them up once and for all. Like,
right.
that's a false setup. And change is how we relate to that pain.
Yes, you were mentioning that before the recording too. I'd like to explore that a little bit too.
Yeah, what we don't get a lot of training in my opinion, and I trained myself through meditation to do this because I had to, because anger was really overrunning my system. When we talk about presence, being present with an emotion is basically the last thing any of us really want to do.
Yeah,
I mean, because we feel the loss of control, like I'm going to cry, and like I don't want to feel this. And so that was a kind of a refrain for many decades, is I don't want to feel this. And then
yeah,
eventually I'm like, but none of what I'm doing is working. So I have to try something else. What if I do feel this?
yeah,
And so in meditation, when you sit with, like, let's say anger, my teacher, Pema Chodron, says, anger is a seed that burns, and it will create karma. You'll do something, karma. It'll create, I mean, it's like a thing in the world that now has to be reconciled and forgiven. Like, it creates karma,
yes,
some activity you now have to deal with. You created a headache for
yeah,
your short lesson on karma. What if you didn't do that, but let the anger burn off in you by feeling it, and it pervades you? It feels like drinking poison or standing
yeah,
in fire, and it's absolutely overtakes your system. But then something happens in the subconscious brain that says, I'm still here. And then the next
yeah,
moment happens. Then you get to learn something by I felt this. I didn't die, and now I can look at it with now that the dust has settled as something wants to be understood.
Yeah.
There is information about anger that I'm not dealing with, and it's that I'm sad and I don't love myself.
Yeah.
And now you have a gift of something else. So that's how I understand it.
That's fantastic. And you know, what you just talked about is what often fuels some of the best books that are written out there. It's
I'm working
that,
on mine right now about this.
yeah. I mean, it's those alchemical moments where you go through the crucible and the crucible didn't kill you. It transformed you. It turned you into a phoenix. I'm gonna mix my metaphors all over the place.
I love it for sure. I can follow you there for sure. Yeah.
Life is very
Yeah.
phoenix-like because you have it, and now I've got, okay, I'm a total geek here. There's an episode of Xena where in order to become Xena the warrior princess, she had to go through a gauntlet of leaving her past life where she was the the love interest of a warlord. And when that all fell apart, she had to go through the gauntlet and they all beat her up and she came through, but on the other side, she found her strength and became warrior princess.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey. So it's like sometimes, and there's the two heroes. There's the heroes and there's the heroines. What the heroes is an outward growth, whereas the heroines is an inward growth. But both of them go through their own form of fire, where
Yeah.
things are not easy. They're not easy, and growth. It's a story I tell about, and it's probably not even true, but I like it. Where this guy goes into a pet store and he finds an aquarium with tadpoles on one side, a big rock, and then the other side's empty. And he asks the pet owner, "Why are you doing that?" And the pet owner says, "Well, the tadpoles can't become frogs unless they go over this rock." So it's those trials, those hard things. It's facing our fears, being courageous when we don't feel it, because
Oh
actually
gosh, yeah.
courage is just fear face. That's all it is. You're feeling the fear anyway. At least that's the way it's been in my life. It's like, I'm
Eleanor
scared to death,
Roosevelt
but I'm
quote.
doing it anyway.
Yeah, feel the fear and do it anyway. No one said life would be like easy necessarily, but we keep
Yeah.
expecting it to be like
Yeah.
relaxing, and it's not.
Yeah. And we see other people living what we think is an easy life,
Right.
but we don't see what all that work they did under the ground before they became the bamboo shoot or whatever.
Yes, and I think the hero's journey, because you mentioned earlier, what is that moment that makes us say, I want to do this work? We don't see the work people are doing.
Yeah.
We don't actually know the story they're living. I think a lot of people feel so worthless and don't really recognize it at
Yeah.
the time. And so people who appear to be an asshole or grumpy, or they're maybe just really suffering, and we don't have the
Yeah.
capacity to recognize the pain in other people in the ways that it shows up because we can't see what they're living. Likewise, to
Exactly.
do the inner work on our own stuff and to deal with our own pain, we don't give it the time of day a lot of times because we don't have models for that being visible
Yeah.
in the world, a visible process.
Yeah.
So the
I heard a
hero's journey, the heroine's journey of going inside
Yep.
is largely invisible to everybody else. We don't know it's
Exactly.
true.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think a lot of people focus on one journey over the other, but I think we all go through both of them. I mean,
Sure.
one's more action oriented and has masculine energy, one's more internal and more feminine, but we all have masculine and feminine within us. And
And
so
at the
we
same time, I
at
think.
the same time, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
I think it's embracing your journey is okay because it's your journey. And you don't wanna compare it to someone else's journey. I mean, would I like to be someone like, I don't know, Sir Richard Branson or Elon Musk? Absolutely. Einstein, why not? I'm not them. I'm karma, and I have to embrace that.
Mhm.
And you're
then I would
Joanna.
take it
You
a
have
step
to
further.
embrace that.
I would take it a step further and say, those of us who are like, but they're playing big. Why am I not playing big? I find
Yeah.
that question really exciting. And if you
Yeah.
can sit with it long enough, you get to design what playing big would be for you.
Absolutely.
And then you
Absolutely.
get to find out what you need to learn in yourself to meet that, increase your capacity to live into something bigger than you already know how to do.
Absolutely.
And so if there's success, you're like, well, I'm going to embrace my journey. And it's like, I'm just going to survive instead of thrive. I want to say, you're not here to do that. You're here to
No.
keep being a creator. And if you don't feel like you look around and you want to be more successful, but like compromising your standards, I'd say, stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
I would say, don't let your self-doubt be a reason to stay small. Let your self-doubt be a reason to believe more, because you recognize that it wants you to give up, but you are
Exactly.
bigger than your self-doubt. So you use it as fuel to keep going. When you see it
Exactly.
go up, don't listen to it. Say, oh, there you are. Now I know I have to keep going because you're here, self-doubt.
Exactly. And I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? I mean, are you really going to die? Well, if you jump off a cliff, maybe. But
Well, there is only one way out of here eventually. There's one door
exactly.
and we're all taking it.
Exactly. And I mean, my personal belief is that you're not going to die until you're done.
Yeah.
So if you
In
don't, I
Buddhism,
mean,
they say alive, 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 dead. It's just that quick.
yeah. And so why not live full out?
That is a great question to sit with. And
Yeah,
really the question why not can be alchemical.
absolutely. Well, we are coming up on the end of our time together. I could talk to you forever. Is there anything that you want to leave my audience with before we move on?
I hope that you're hearing this as the universe speaking to you, because none of us are here to stay small, and we all need support and we all need help. And I've certainly found my share of support and help and still do. Coaches especially need it because we think that we don't need it anymore. That's why we need it more than everyone else. And it matters to find the coach that really will see you and support where you are. And I think everyone should take on this as homework and say, how can I sit with the question, why not?
Oh, that's wonderful. So if someone wanted to learn more about you and work with you, where would they go? What's the best place?
Yeah, I work with people who are on the speaking circuit, sharing their story, their knowledge and experience, and are really wanting to get up and feel authentic as the host of the party, inviting people on their journey and ready to get clear on that message. My website is my name, JoannaHortonMcPherson.com.
Oh, that's
And
long. I will put it
yeah,
in the show notes.
yeah, put it on the show notes. And I also have a video course coming out in January, roughly. So people who are saying, oh, coaching is a little outside of my reach right now, I do group coaching as part of that video course. And so you get a lot of value out of going through the process on your own with
Perfect.
my support and guidance along the way. So I also write, and I really think what we've talked about, Karma, and I know you do too, it's great to browse what they put out there. And I put a lot of stuff out there on LinkedIn, on my socials. I provide a lot of insights that can be so what you needed to read today is what I hear.
Right.
Check that out too.
I will. I will. And I will definitely put links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to talk with you.
Yes. Well, this is the end of the Author Switch podcast. This is Carma Spence saying ciao for now. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Author Switch podcast. If you enjoyed today's show and want to support its mission, here's how to help. First, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your engagement helps my channel grow and reach more aspiring and established authors. Your ratings and reviews are invaluable. They help me reach more listeners and continue delivering top-notch content. To catch up on past episodes, including those no longer available on podcast platforms, visit authorswitch.com/episodes. There, you can choose to watch or listen to your favorite episodes at your convenience. If you'd like to show additional support, consider dropping a tip in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/Carma Spence. Your contributions help keep the podcast running and are greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a part of the Author Switch community. Until next time, keep writing.